January 1945. The Ardennes had stopped being a battlefield and turned into a graveyard of steel. Burned-out Shermans lay half-buried in snowdrifts, their gun barrels pointing like frozen fingers toward a sky that hadn't been blue in weeks. Corporal Jack Turner was tired of fixing ghosts. He crouched beside the last working tank in his unit, Able 6, a mud-stained Sherman idling weakly beside a broken stone farmhouse. Its engine coughed like an old man. The rest of the platoon was somewhere ahead, hidden in the forest, holding a road that didn't matter anymore. Turner wasn't supposed to be here alone, but orders had blurred with exhaustion. The radio hissed with faint static. Then came the voice of Sergeant Mills, calm but sharp. "Artillery spotters seen movement. Krauts arrange in this position. Get that tank under cover now." Turner looked around. There was nowhere to go. The farmhouse walls were too low, the trees too sparse. Snow stretched in every direction, bright enough to blind. If he started the tank and tried to move it, the engine smoke would give away their exact location. He glanced at his watch. 10 minutes, maybe less, before the first shells hit. He'd spent years as a mechanic before the war. Detroit factories, assembly lines, engines that sang when you listened right. Out here, the music had turned to thunder. But machines still spoke the same language. They complained when frightened. They rattled when afraid. He placed his gloved hand on the Sherman's side armour, feeling the cold seep through. "You're not dying here," he muttered. A distant rumble rolled across the forest. The Germans were zeroing in. Turner felt it. That gut-deep vibration, like the air itself tightening. The spotter must have already marked them. "Think," he whispered. "What do they see from up there?" He pictured it, the world from a Luftwaffe scout's glass eye or an artillery observer's perch. A dark rectangular shape in a white field. Heat and shadow. Contrast. That's all it took to die. Then as the wind shifted, the idea struck him like static. He grabbed his toolkit, sprinted to the farmhouse, and kicked open the door. Inside, half the roof was gone. The air smelled of smoke and dust. A cracked mirror leaned against the wall, catching a shard of grey light from the snow outside. Turner froze. Mirrors. Reflection. Distortion. He ran back outside. The tank's hull was already frosting over, its metal gleaming dull silver in the cold. He climbed onto the turret and scanned the ground. Boot prints, melted snow patches, the black smear of exhaust. To the human eye, it was a tank. To a scope, it was a perfect target. Unless the eye couldn't trust what it saw. He dragged the mirror out into the open, then another from a collapsed truck nearby. He angled them against snowbanks, adjusting their tilt until the reflections bent the horizon. Broken images of snow, trees, sky. He smeared oil across the surfaces to blur the shine, then kicked snow over the Sherman's tracks. The shape began to melt into the white around it, like a photograph fading under sunlight. From 50 meters away, even his own eyes hesitated. The tank seemed to waver, half visible, half gone. But the trick wouldn't fool radar or trained artillery observers. He needed motion, something to mask the truth in chaos. Turner tore a tarpaulin from the supply truck and slung it over the rear of the Sherman. He opened the engine panel and rerouted the exhaust pipe through the tarp's folds, guiding the smoke into the farmhouse ruins. The cold air mixed with the exhaust, turning it into a wide, drifting cloud that spread across the snow like fog. The farmhouse burned in silence, not with fire, but with illusion. Turner crouched beside the tank, breath misting through his scarf. The wind shifted again, blowing the smoke outward, bending the mirror reflections into a ghostly shimmer. From above, there'd be nothing to distinguish tank from snow. No contrast, no edge, no target. just a blur in the storm. The first artillery whistle cut the air. He threw himself flat as the shell screamed past and hit somewhere behind the ridge. The second followed closer, then another. The world became thunder and light. The farmhouse collapsed in on itself, throwing ash into the grey air. When it stopped, he lifted his head. The tank was still there, perfectly intact. All around it, the ground was cratered and black. The German guns had walked their fire across the field, but every shell had landed just wide, like the artillery couldn't find the mark again. Through the haze of smoke and snow, the Able 6 shimmered like a mirage, half hidden, half imagined. Turner sat up slowly, ears ringing, eyes wide. He'd made a tank disappear, without moving it an inch. The smoke lingered long after the last shell fell, curling around the shattered farmhouse like a living thing. Turner stood slowly, brushing frost from his jacket. His ears still rang, his vision swam, but the impossible was real. The tank had survived untouched. Snow drifted through the silence, thick and slow, landing on metal that should have been glowing red hot but wasn't. The illusion had worked so well it unsettled even him. He stared at the Sherman's curved hull and felt something strange. Not pride, but disbelief, like the world had blinked and forgotten where to aim. Boots crunched behind him. Sergeant Mills emerged from the tree line, rifle slung, face grey with exhaustion. "Corporal," he rasped, "I thought you were vaporized." Turner nodded toward the tank. "Guess not." Mills stopped mid-step, squinting through the haze. "What in God's name?" From where the sergeant stood, the Sherman barely existed, its edges blurred into the smoke, its shadow swallowed by the snow. Mills took another step forward, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "You moved it?" "No, sir." "Then what am I looking at?" Turner exhaled, steam rising in the cold. "Nothing you can hit with a shell." Mills walked a slow circle around the tank, muttering to himself. The Krauts shelled this whole field. Every hit within 30 yards, except here. He stopped, facing Turner. "How?" Turner hesitated. He looked around, the mirrors half buried in snow, the smoke still twisting upward, the tarp flapping weakly in the wind. It didn't look like genius. It looked like desperation. "I made it stop being a target." "That's not an answer." "I made it lie." Mills frowned. "You what?" Turner pointed to the mirrors, the smoke. From the air, the light bends wrong. The heat scatters. The shadows disappear. To them, this isn't a tank, it's terrain. Just white noise. The sergeant blinked, trying to process. "You're telling me you tricked German artillery with junk and fog?" "And not junk," Turner said quietly. "Reflections, distortion. The only thing harder to hit than armour is a mistake." For a long moment neither spoke. The wind whistled softly through the ruins, rattling the metal like a breath. Finally, Mills gave a dry, disbelieving laugh. "You just turned a Sherman into a ghost." Turner didn't smile. "Ghosts can't burn." They stood there side by side, watching the wind reshape the smoke. In the distance, a low drone began to rise, faint, rhythmic. Mills' expression changed instantly. Planes. Turner's stomach dropped. Luftwaffe? Recon at least, maybe worse. The sound grew louder, the slow hum of twin engines slicing the cloud cover. Turner looked up at the grey sky, scanning for movement. Then he saw it. A dark cross gliding between the clouds, banking lazily toward their position. Mills barked, "Under cover!" Turner didn't move. He looked back at the Sherman, the smoke still drifting, the mirrors still shining faintly. To the plane above, the pattern would be seamless. The pilot would see only a burned field, a collapsed farmhouse, a smear of snow and fog. No armour, No life. He whispered, "Let's see if it works twice." The German plane made a wide pass overhead. For 10 eternal seconds, Turner could see its underbelly, the bombs slung beneath, the glint of the pilot's goggles as he peered down. The engines roared, then faded. The plane didn't dive, didn't drop, just circled once, then turned east and disappeared into the cloud. Mills let out a slow breath. He didn't see us. Turner looked down at his hands, blackened with soot and grease, trembling now that the danger had passed. He saw everything, just not what he expected. The sergeant clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You might have just saved the whole division, Turner. I'll be damned if I understand how." Turner glanced at the mirrors again. Their surfaces were dull now, coated in frost. To anyone else, they'd look useless. But he saw more. The way the snow bent around them, how the light curved slightly wrong, like the air itself was remembering his trick. That night, as darkness swallowed the valley, he lay beside the tank, listening to the wind moving through the wrecks. It sounded like the sighs of machines long dead. He thought of the German pilot, the spotter, the gunners who'd fired into nothing, men convinced of what they'd seen, only to find absence where certainty should have been. He whispered to the cold, "Maybe that's how war ends, not when one side wins, but when the other stops believing what it sees." The tank gleamed faintly under the moonlight, half shadow, half reflection, as if it still wasn't sure whether it was real. By dawn the forest was quiet again, too quiet for a place still technically at war. The snow had stopped falling, but mist clung low to the ground, turning every sound into something distant. Turner crouched beside Able 6, cleaning soot off its gun barrel with a rag torn from his coat. The illusion had survived the night, and so had he. But word was spreading. Just after sunrise, a jeep arrived from Division Command. 2 officers stepped out, one tall, with a cap too clean for combat, the other thin and pale, carrying a clipboard. They looked out of place among the mud and wreckage. The taller man spoke first. "Corporal Jack Turner?" Turner stood brushing snow from his gloves. "Sir?" "I'm Major Caldwell. This is Lieutenant Renner, Intelligence Branch. We're told you made a tank disappear." Turner hesitated. "Not exactly disappear, sir. More like misdirected." The lieutenant smirked. "That's a polite word for delusion." Caldwell gave him a look to stay silent, then turned back to Turner. "We've got reconnaissance photos. German shells hit every position around this one, except yours. You care to explain why?" Turner looked at the frost-covered mirrors, half buried near the tank, the smoke-stained farmhouse ruins. They were looking at the wrong thing. Caldwell folded his arms. "You're saying you deceived trained artillery spotters?" "I didn't deceive them," Turner said quietly. "I let them deceive themselves." The major raised an eyebrow. "How?" Turner crouched, picking up one of the mirrors. The surface was cracked, coated in frost. Light reflects off snow differently depending on angle and temperature. Mix that with exhaust smoke and frost glare, and you can bend the horizon just enough to fool optics. From above, this tank becomes part of the terrain. Renner laughed. "You're talking about optical illusions in a war zone." Turner glanced at him. "We use illusions every day, Lieutenant. Camouflage nets, smoke screens, decoys. I just built one that thinks for itself." Caldwell studied the field for a long moment. The way the sunlight caught the mirrors, the faint shimmer that still danced where the smoke had been. Even he couldn't quite tell where the tank ended and the landscape began. "Could you do it again?" Turner nodded slowly. "If I have mirrors, fuel, and a day without dying first." The major's radio crackled before he could respond. A voice came through, tense, hurried. "Caldwell, this is command. Enemy armor spotted regrouping east of your position. Possible counterattack within the hour. Renner blanched. They're coming here? Caldwell clicked the radio off, his face set. They must have tracked the survivors from yesterday. Looks like your trick bought us one night, Corporal. Now let's see if it holds up to daylight. Within minutes the camp turned frantic. Infantry scrambled to dig new foxholes. The single operational Sherman, Turner's ghost tank, became the centerpiece of their defense. Caldwell ordered it moved into a shallow depression overlooking the road. Turner protested. If we move it, we lose the illusion's alignment. Caldwell barked, we can't hide it forever. If they see armor here, they'll think we're reinforced. That might buy us time. Turner's jaw tightened. They won't see armor. Not if I do this right. He got to work. He angled the mirrors across snowbanks, polished the frost with handfuls of soot to create contrast, then used engine oil to scatter sunlight into faint glints that mimicked distant reflections. Every shimmer, every shadow was deliberate, a deception so fragile that a single gust of wind could shatter it. By midday the sound came again, faint at first, then unmistakable. The low rhythmic growl of engines, dozens of them, German armor. Caldwell peered through binoculars. They're coming straight for us. Renner swallowed hard. They'll spot us in seconds. Turner didn't look up. He was crouched beside the Sherman, checking the smoke vents. No, they won't. The wind shifted south, sweeping smoke across the valley like a grey curtain. The air bent light in subtle ways, reflections of snow glinting where they shouldn't, shadows curving where they couldn't. The illusion came alive again, breathing with the weather. The first German tank crested the ridge. It paused, turret scanning. The next followed, then another. A line of steel beasts, cautious, methodical. Turner could almost hear the clank of their gears, the voices inside, wondering what waited below. Caldwell held his breath. The lead panzer rotated its gun slowly toward the field. Turner's heart pounded once, hard. Then, the turret shifted away. The German column rumbled past the valley, never firing, their guns aimed west, where the destroyed farmhouse and cratered snow made it look like the fight had already been lost. When the last tank disappeared into the forest, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, Caldwell exhaled. They didn't see us. Turner stared at the mirrors gleaming faintly in the snow. They saw exactly what they wanted to. Proof we were already dead. The major turned to him. You just saved a battalion with reflections, Corporal. Command needs to see this. Turner's face was calm, distant. Command won't believe it. Caldwell gave a thin smile. They will when the photos come in. But Turner knew better. The best tricks were the ones no one could explain. And this was one the wind itself had signed off on. Lieutenant Otto Weiss had spent 3 years staring at the war through glass. From the cramped cockpit of his Fieseler Storch, he'd mapped death with mathematical precision, coordinates, elevations, target ranges. The sky had made him feel untouchable, like a god with binoculars. But gods, he was learning, could go blind. The morning of January 16th was supposed to be routine. His orders were simple. Verify American positions northeast of Malmedy before the next artillery push. The snow had cleared, visibility perfect. The radio crackled with cold voices from command. Confirm armor sighted near the ridge. One Sherman, possibly active. He banked east, adjusting altitude, and brought the glass to his eyes. Below, the valley lay silent. The world looked clean. Too clean. Charred ruins, cratered snow, frozen rivers of mud. Everything dead. Then he saw it, the faint shape of a Sherman tank half buried near a collapsed farmhouse. He focused the scope, waiting for movement. None. No engine heat, no crew tracks, just a husk. Weiss frowned. "Target appears destroyed," he reported. The voice in his headset snapped back. "Negative. Confirm heat signature. Previous report indicated active engine." He checked again. Nothing. Just haze, faint shimmer over snow. It looked wrong. The sunlight bounced off something, a glint that flickered and vanished. Mirrors? Metal? He zoomed in, adjusting the lens. The angles didn't make sense. The snow's reflection bent upward, distorting the shape. Shadows didn't align. The entire field seemed to ripple slightly, as if reality itself were breathing. Weiss rubbed his eyes. "Optical interference," he muttered. "Impossible." "Say again?" He hesitated. "There's distortion on the ground, possibly smoke or camouflage net. Can you confirm tank status?" Weiss exhaled. "It's there, but it's not there. I see outlines, but the contrast keeps shifting." Static filled the line. "Weiss, are you telling us you're seeing ghosts?" He almost laughed. "Maybe I am." He circled lower, 800 meters now, engine whining in protest. The air shimmered again. Heat? No. The temperature was below freezing. This wasn't heat. It was reflection. He realized then that the light wasn't lying. He was. His instruments were lying. The gauges flickered slightly. The compass needle spun. The light bouncing off that field was disorienting his senses. It wasn't camouflage. It was misdirection. "Sir," he called over the radio, voice tense. "Whatever that is, it's interfering with navigation. I'm getting compass drift." "Pull up, Weiss. Pull out now." But he didn't. He banked lower, squinting through the haze, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The farmhouse wreckage looked black against the snow. The tank faded in and out, not cloaked, simply misplaced in the eye. The mirrors, he realized? Someone had positioned them deliberately, aligned with sunlight, snowbanks, smoke. Crude, brilliant. Weiss whispered under his breath, half admiring, half afraid. Someone down there knows how to draw with light. A sudden flash below, not from a gun, but from a mirror catching the sun. His stomach dropped. It was deliberate. Someone was watching him back. He pulled hard on the stick, the plane jerking upward. His observer in the rear seat shouted, "Was that fire?" "No," Weiss said. "It was something else." The radio barked again. "Report, Weiss. Is the target active or destroyed?" He stared down one last time. The reflection had shifted again. Now the tank was gone entirely, replaced by a sheet of glowing snow and shadow. There was nowhere to aim, no geometry to trust. Weiss clicked his mic. "Recommend aborting artillery strike. The target cannot be confirmed." "Explain that, Lieutenant." Weiss looked at the sky, then the horizon. "Because I'm looking at it, and it's not there." He turned west, throttling the plane higher. Below him the valley lay silent, untouched, unreal. As he disappeared into cloud cover, Turner lowered the mirror he'd just adjusted. He'd seen the glint of the plane's glass eye and turned its vision back on itself. Mills crouched beside him, whispering, "Did they see us?" Turner shook his head. "They saw what they wanted. Proof their bombs already worked." He placed the mirror down gently, as though laying a tombstone. "Even the sky can be fooled if you give it a reason." Far above, Weiss's plane vanished into grey, carrying confusion back to the German command. The kind of confusion that buys time. And in war, time was just another word for life. The storm came without warning, thick rolling fog swallowing the valley like a flood. By nightfall, visibility had dropped to nothing. Turner stood beside Able 6, the cold biting through his gloves, every sound around him muffled into a strange underwater silence. The mirrors were gone now, half buried or shattered. His trick had survived 2 days longer than anyone had thought possible. But illusions, like people, eventually ran out of light. The radio crackled weakly. Sergeant Mills's voice cut through the static. "Turner, command says armor's advancing again, full column this time. They're not scouting anymore, they're hunting." Turner closed his eyes. "How close?" "Too close. We've got wounded we can't move. Reinforcements are 40 miles out." He looked toward the horizon, though there was nothing to see, just fog glowing faintly from the fires of other battles. Somewhere in that grey, the enemy was coming. He could feel it in the ground. Mills climbed out of a trench, limping. "Can you do it again? That mirror trick of yours?" Turner shook his head slowly. "Not like before. The light's gone. No sun, no reflections." Mills swore under his breath. "Then we're dead men?" Turner stared at the fog, thinking. Maybe not. He walked back to the Sherman and ran his hand along the armour, feeling the cold metal pulse faintly with residual heat. The engine had been running for hours, fumes pooling in the fog. The air shimmered faintly with exhaust. An idea began to form, desperate, dangerous, but all he had left. He turned to Mills. "What if the fog is the illusion?" The sergeant frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're navigating by heat signatures now. Our tank's the only warm thing for miles. If we kill the engine, we vanish. But if we move the heat somewhere else..." Mills stared at him. "You can't move heat. You can fake it." He grabbed an oil drum, rolled it into the open, and dumped the remaining fuel onto a tarp. He tore strips of cloth, soaked them, and wrapped them around a pile of metal scrap. Then he wired the mess to a radio battery, struck a flare, and stepped back. The flames caught slow at first, then roared to life, bright orange, bleeding through the fog like a phantom sun. The smoke curled upward, thick and dark, drifting toward the tree line. "There," Turner said, pointing. "That's our decoy." Mills's eyes widened. "They'll target that?" "Exactly." He sprinted to the Sherman, climbed onto the hull, and began dismantling the periscope assembly. The fog was thickening fast, glowing faintly from the burning trap he'd made. Somewhere beyond the ridge the sound began. Engines, dozens of them. The enemy was close now. "Jack," Mills said quietly, "if they fire artillery, we'll be caught in it too." Turner kept working. "Then we stay behind the lie." The first shells landed minutes later. The valley shook, snow and soil erupting into the air. The German gunners had locked onto the burning decoy, hammering it with precision. Each explosion lit the fog from within, bursts of orange and red flickering through the grey like lightning trapped in a storm. Mills ducked behind a crate, shouting over the noise, "It's working!" Turner didn't answer. He was staring at the Sherman, the one real tank left, hidden now under layers of smoke and shadow. The illusion was complete again, a battlefield made of echoes and ghosts. Then came the sound he dreaded, a high distant whine. The Luftwaffe. Bombers. Mills looked up, pale. They'll see through it. Infrared. They'll spot the heat difference. Turner's mind raced. There wasn't enough time. He looked at the Sherman, its engines still radiating warmth. If the bombers saw that, they'd know. He made a decision before he could talk himself out of it. He jumped down, yanked open the engine hatch, and began rerouting the exhaust feed, redirecting it toward the burning decoy. If he could push the engine gases toward the fire, blend the signatures, the bombers would never know which heat was real. "Jack, what the hell are you doing?" Mills shouted. Turner shouted back through the roar of shells, "Finishing the trick." The smoke thickened until he could barely breathe. The heat slammed against his face, his coat catching sparks. He could hear the planes overhead, the whine rising to a shriek. The first bomb fell and missed. The second, closer, but still off target. Then silence. The engines above veered away, fading into the storm. Mills crawled from cover, coughing. They're pulling back. You did it. He stopped. Turner wasn't answering. He found him slumped against the Sherman's hull, half conscious, his coat scorched, face streaked with soot. The heat and fumes had taken him down before the bombs could. Mills knelt beside him. "Jack, you still with me?" Turner's eyes opened weakly. He looked toward the fog where the decoy fire still burned, dimming now into embers. "Did it work?" Mills nodded. "Yeah, they never saw us." Turner smiled faintly, his breath a white ghost in the cold. "Good. Then maybe I really did make it disappear." His eyes drifted shut as the last of the fire faded, leaving only fog, snow, and silence. The Germans never found the Sherman. To them, it had simply vanished. The snow melted long before anyone found the wreck. When the thaw came in spring, all that remained on that ridge was a half-collapsed farmhouse, a burned patch of ground, and one Sherman tank resting perfectly upright. No blast marks, no tracks, no sign it had ever moved. The American recovery crews who stumbled on it weeks later wrote in their report, "Vehicle appears untouched, engine cold, no crew present, no shell damage, cause of abandonment, unknown." They towed Able 6 back to Bastogne, cleaned the soot from its armour, and sent it to a depot for scrap. No one asked what had happened there. The war was ending, and everyone had their own ghost to bury. Corporal Jack Turner's name didn't appear on any citation lists. There was no medal, no commendation, no line in the official record. The paperwork said, "Missing after engagement." To the army, he was one more mechanic who hadn't made it home. But stories move faster than truth. Men who'd fought near the ridge told of a tank that couldn't be hit, one that vanished in the fog, then reappeared miles away, untouched. A ghost machine. Some said it was a fluke, a trick of weather. Others swore they'd seen reflections where no mirrors stood, smoke moving against the wind, light bending wrong. One rumour claimed that German pilots refused to fly over that valley again. They said their instruments went wild, that the sky itself distorted when they looked down. One Luftwaffe observer wrote in his diary, later found by Allied intelligence, "There was nothing there, and yet my eyes told me there was. I saw a tank that should not exist, and then it didn't." For years after the war, farmers in the Ardennes still found fragments of mirror glass half buried in the soil, shards of something that had once caught light and twisted it into safety. Jack Turner was never found. Some said he died in the blast. Others believed he walked away into the fog that night and simply kept walking. One man from his unit claimed he saw footprints leading east, fading where the snow began again, as if the earth itself refused to remember where he went. The Sherman he saved was eventually restored and displayed in a military museum in Brussels. Visitors pass by it every day, reading the small brass plaque on the floor. It says only, "Recovered near Bastogne, 1945. Crew unknown." But if you stand close enough, if the light hits the glass cases just right, you can see your own reflection curve faintly across its armour, warped, shimmering, like the horizon bending through winter fog. Some say that's just the lighting. Others say it's the ghost of Turner's last illusion, still at work, still making the war blink, still hiding one tank from a world that never truly saw it. Because sometimes survival isn't about running or fighting. Sometimes it's about making the impossible believable, even for just long enough to live. And somewhere in the silence between mirrors and snow, the mechanic who made a tank disappear without moving it is still listening to the wind, waiting for the next war that needs to be fooled.